Hello, everybody. It's Stephen here for another episode of the Idiot Quilter, and welcome to my weekly episode. It is episode number 357 for May the 5th, 2026. So let's just jump right into what I've been working on. Let's see here. Get the right picture up for you. Here we go. Okay, this is the In the Hoop project that I've been working on for a little while. These are the panels for the front of a tote bag, and it's called Gilded Books and Blooms. You can find this pattern on, I believe I got it from Urban Threads. Yes, and as I said, it's called Gilded Books and Blooms. Now, I've got all the front panels done and all the back panels done. Now I have to work on the bottom panel, which looks like a very ornate kind of wrought iron kind of bookshelf for these, and then I can put the book together. Now I don't think I'm going to have it all together and done by the time we leave for our trip to Japan, but I'll probably be working on it tomorrow on Sewing with Stephen. But it's coming along very nicely, and you know how much I really enjoy doing the In the Hoop projects on my embroidery machine. I think they add a dimension to a project that you don't get when you just embroider something. This is a combination of both. So yeah, this is going to be very fun. I think it's going to be a very elegant tote. Still a lot of work to do on it, not so much on the embroidery part of it, but on the assembly part, making the lining, all of that. And I don't know if I'm going to, well, I'll see how stiff it is when I get the panel sewn together. I don't know if I'm going to have to put an interfacing or a light foam or something for the bag. I like a nice stiff bag, but sorry, my throat was going. Needed the coffee. I will see as I get working on it. Now, another project I'm working on, and I'm having a little bit of a debate with myself about this. Okay, you've seen this in other parts. I got it all sewn together yesterday. It looks a little weird, doesn't it? Or does it? To me, there's something not quite right. This, of course, is made up of scraps from various shirts that Walter has made for me. And I decided to put it on point. And I just improv'd it on my design board. Now, if you look at the very top and the very bottom, there is this white part. It's actually an inset triangle, a white one. I intended to go black and white, black and white, black and white on all the triangles. Excuse me. But what I did not perceive when I was putting it together was how those white triangles were going to translate into, the rest of the quilt, where there is actually some other white parts. So it almost looks, the way I took the picture anyways, it almost looks like there's a piece missing. There's not. There's a white triangle in there. Now, I could fix that if I put a black triangle instead of the white triangle there, but then it's going to look a little off balance too. Excuse me, choking up over this. And it's not going to be easy to do that. It's all sewn together, as I said. I think I'm going to leave it as it is. I may put a border on this. A border made up of half square triangles that look like, that'll sort of resemble faux prairie points in a sense. They won't be, but I'm debating on that. I have more of my fabric. I could do that, and that might add another dimension to this. It might also be just too much. It's already pretty busy, with these fabrics and everything. So I'm thinking, okay, it's a little off when you first look at it. So maybe I should call it slightly off, or I was thinking cockeyed, or something's not quite right as the name for this. And that might be the name I'll go with. Something's just not quite right. I thought of putting in the word off kilter, but I don't want to step on the toes of Ian, the off Quilter crafter, because that's kind of his brand, right? So I don't know yet. You can let me know in the comments what you think. But for now, I don't think I can change anything, not without major ripping out and redoing rows. And I'm not even sure if that would work. So yeah, it is what it is. Definitely it's a conversation piece. I would say that. Okay. Um, so let's talk about the Alaska quilt, shall we? I give up. I give up on that beast. It is a beautiful quilt. The fabrics are beautiful that are in it. But my mind has been raked over the coals. I am just completely done with it. I am very disappointed in trying to get the points. I am very disappointed in how the pattern is written. It is not clearly written. I am very disappointed that there isn't a version that I have found yet. Maybe there is one, I'm not sure. A version of it that tells you how to use the ruler. Videos, I went looking for videos, the ones from the designer of this quilt. I'm not going to say her name because you know who she is. Her designs are beautiful. Her instructions suck. That's all I'm going to say about that. Her videos do not show you anything. They're not well done at all. So, cut my losses. It's not done. I have 7.5 of the block sets done out of 13. It's in a box in a corner. I'm not going to look at it again, probably until we get back from Japan. And then I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it into something else. I'm going to go through and I'm going to find the blocks that I can live with in terms of their points. You see, I'm very picky about points. Very picky about points. That is my pet peeve. Cutting off points. I don't want to do it. I don't like it. To me, quite frankly, this will sound very arrogant. If you want to show that you're an amateur quilter, cut off your points. There, I said it. I'm sorry if that's hurt some people's feelings. If you're okay with cut off points, if you considered a customization, a design element, or whatever, then you go ahead and do it. I thought that way too when I first got into quilting. I thought, points don't matter. They do. They do. They change the whole look of a quilt when you start cutting them off. And I'm sure if you have any ambitions, if you're a new quilter, of putting a quilt in a quilt show, one of the things you have to learn to tackle is how not to cut off your points. And I already did a video about that. So that's what discourages me the most about this quilt. I have been cutting off my points, and it doesn't matter what I do. The thing is, I could rewrite this pattern so the points don't get cut off. What I would do is I would make all the pieces that have to be trimmed, I would make them a slightly oversized. All I need is them to be about 1/4 inch bigger than what the pattern calls for, and then points would not be cut off when I'm trimming it up. I know some people are using a Deb Tucker ruler for this quilt with great success. One person told me that her blocks are coming out 10 inches with the Deb Tucker ruler, and she's planning, I think, to just cut it down to the 9.5 that each block is supposed to be according to this pattern, and that will leave lots of room for her points. She'll have no problem with that. But there is very little extra, if any, on these. So the tiniest little mistake, or well, it may not even be a mistake. There's so many factors in this. I mean, everything's cut on the bias, so everything stretches. You can starch the hell out of it if you want to. I'm not really a big starcher, but I was using my Acorn pressing solution on this one, I can tell you. There are marks you can put on it using pins and stuff with the ruler. That was not very clear how you did that, and it looked extremely awkward, to say the least about it. It's not worth it. Quite frankly, this quilt is not worth it. So for any of you out there that have made the quilt, you didn't cut off your points, and it looks beautiful, you need a gold star. You really do. I am not worthy. You are a much better quilter than I am. That's all I can say about that. So if something's not giving you joy, and you've heard me say this before, throw it out. Stop. Reinvent it. So I'm not going to reinvent the pattern. It's not worth my time nor my effort. I will do something with what I've already done, and I'll create some other thing, something an original by me. Hopefully not cockeyed, like the one I just showed you. And that's my plan, but that's not going to happen until after we get back from Japan. Okay, so speaking of going to Japan, some things on my scheduling here will have changed. This will be the last Idiot Quilter episode for about 3 weeks. But however, we will be doing videos, I'm hoping every day, excuse me, from Japan. Given our technology and everything, and I think our technology is going to be pretty good from what we can tell and what we're setting up to be able to do that. So stay tuned for that. I talked yesterday on Monday Morning Coffee with Stephen. I talked about possibility of us doing some lives. We'll be 12 hours ahead of Eastern time here in North America. So, timing is kind of off for that kind of thing, but we'll see what we can do. And yeah, so there will be, however, a Sewing with Stephen this Wednesday at the time of recording that. That would be tomorrow, May the 6th, 2026. And that will be the last one, too, of those for about 3 weeks. So those of you that are regulars to Sewing with Stephen, or those of you that wish to become regulars, you're always welcome. There won't be one after tomorrow for 3 weeks. And then, of course, pop-up sew days, which we just had one. This past weekend. There won't be another pop-up sew day in May. There'll be one probably in June. I'm planning right now tentatively that will be on June the 6th. So watch this space for the link for that. The link will actually be the same as the link that I used for the last pop-up sew day. So if you copied that over into some file that you have where you keep Zoom link files, it'll be the same one. Now, I did put up one before, about a month ago, and said that would be it, and then I screwed up. So yeah. So if you've got an old one, you weren't at the last pop-up day, and you've been saving the links, you've got an old one, then make sure that when June 6th come around that you have the new one. Yeah. Okay, so what else can we say about that? Nope, that's about it. So let's look at subscribers' comments from last week's episode. And I see the sun is streaming in through my window right now. It's that time of the day, so sorry. I'm going to be like the moon. I have a dark side and I have a light side, okay? If I spin my head all the way around, I can't do that. I'm not Linda Blair. And if you don't know who Linda Blair is, then you're pretty young. Okay. This comes from Carol, and Carol writes, I do the same thing when I line up pinwheel blocks. I nest the diagonal seam lines. Instead of pressing the final seam open, I spin my seam so that one seam allowance goes one way and the other goes on the opposite way. I have tried that about once. It's a great method. It gets rid of the bulk. If I should do that maybe a little bit more often, and I need to go to YouTube and have a refresher on exactly how to do it. I know you just snip one little stitch in the center or something like that, and they'll all just naturally go around. It's kind of cool. Looks like a tiny, tiny, tiny little 4-patch when you're done. But it is a really great idea for keeping, bulk out of your quilt, which I'm sure your long armor, or if you're the long armor, you'd appreciate, because when your needle, if it happens to hit that, it bounces, and it could cause a problem for you. She continues by saying, I have a pattern where I was able to spin the seams in every intersection, and the quilt front looks great. Yeah, a lot of work though, but again, it's those little things that create a award-winning quilt, really. The pattern said all the seams should be pressed open. I tried that technique on a small test wall hanging, and construction was a nightmare. It was hard to match my intersections. Yeah, I agree with you. I do not do open seams unless it's going to create a lot of bulk if I press them to one side. But you're right, when you're trying to get your intersections lined up, it's not as easy to see where that stitch line is and matching it up on both sides. Whereas when you do it to one side, you know, one row goes one way, one row goes this way, and then when you put them on top of each other to sew them together, and you can feel where the intersection is and line it up. And I like that. But not always can you get away with doing it folded over. Sometimes you have to do it as an open seam. Also, a lot of people say they reduce their stitch length if they're going to do open seams, because your open seams could open up a little bit more easily. And that is absolutely true. I've had that problem. Okay, she carries on and says, this is a long comment. I did things my own way when I made a larger wall hanging from the same pattern, and the results were great. I think it would be helpful if pattern writers at least mentioned alternate ways to accomplish some of the basic techniques. I agree with you on that one, totally. That would really help beginners who don't know that it's okay to do things in a way that works better for them. And that's an interesting point too, because, you know, maybe not so much with beginners, but with people who have a little bit more experience, we should not be afraid to deviate from the pattern instructions. I mean, there are many ways to do the same thing when it comes to quilting. So, you know, just because the pattern designer has a pattern out there, and there may be even a big name on it, doesn't mean that necessarily the way they do it is the way that works for your brain. So we shouldn't be afraid to alter things to suit our purposes, because after all, it's our quilt, not the designer's. The pattern I mentioned was for a specialty ruler that I was using. My individual blocks came out smaller than the pattern said they would, so I cut them down a bit to make them all the same size. I've done that. Fortunately, there were no points to cut off. Yeah, that's the one thing you have to watch for on that. Also, the markings on the ruler have no breaks in the line, so it was very difficult to cut my black background fabric because I couldn't see where the fabric's edge was under the line. Yeah, you're coming up, Carol, with all of the problems we run into as quilters. That is a pattern that taught me that specialty rulers aren't always what they're cracked up to be. And that is very true. The specialty ruler that I bought for the Alaska quilt was expensive and not that great. And then when I heard that other people were using a different ruler and having better results, well, I could have kicked myself. That there it is. I bought the bloody ruler, you know. But you don't know these things. I mean, you trust the designer of the pattern, right? They should know what they're doing. I have found in my experience that is not necessarily true. There are good pattern writers, and there's a whole lot out there that just suck. It's not easy to write a pattern. I know, because I've written my own too. And it is not easy. But you've hit the nail on the head here, Carol, with these comments. Okay, and so thank you for sending those to me. And Brenda writes, "Preach it, Stephen. I totally agree with you regarding the pattern. Write her an email letting her know how you feel. Maybe she will acknowledge how bad the pattern is." I thought of that. And there's a couple of reasons why I don't do it. First of all, no pattern writer wants criticism, especially ones who do it as a living and who are big names, and she's a big name. And it hurts your feelings as a pattern writer that someone is criticizing you, because there's no real polite way to put it, you know. I don't suggest you would write a letter saying, "Hi, I did your pattern, it sucked." I mean, that doesn't go over well. But some pattern writers encourage constructive criticism because they want to make their product better, because they're selling it. And if the reputation gets out there that they're a lousy pattern writer, well, there goes their livelihood, if that's their livelihood. Okay? However, if they're a big name like this particular person is, there's a certain level of arrogance. And this particular person, I have never met her in person. I am going by the personality she projects in her social media contacts and things like that. I think she's a little bit stuck on herself. Sorry if that's hurting somebody's feelings out there that really love this particular person. You know, but that's my impression of her. And she has done nothing, and I've watched lots of her videos, she has done nothing to counteract my impression. or change it around to something more positive. So I doubt very much that she would even acknowledge the fact that I had sent her an email about it. Um, Also, in myself, I keep blaming myself. Yes, I have been blaming her pattern writing the whole bit, but I keep thinking, what is it that I am doing that is contributing to the problem? There must be something. So basically, if you live in a glass house, don't throw a seam ripper through it. So that's why I don't bother with it. I just won't bother with any more of her patterns in the future. I have a couple of pattern designers that I've had bad experience with, and I don't buy their patterns. And I do tell other people about this, as I'm doing on here today. However, I hope I'm making it clear that you need to make the final judgment yourself. Take a chance. I'm not the god of pattern writing here, not even close, nowhere close. So you may have more skill than I do, and it's very likely you do. And so you'll have to make the decision for yourself. I'm just telling you, as I always say about the Idiot Quilter episodes, all of this comes from my own personal experience and my opinion. So yeah, take it and do with it what you will. Okay, so thank you, Brenda, for that. All right, reviews and demos time. Well, on So Chatty last week, we talked about using the Accuquilt Cube Corner add-on, and I gave you a bonus video on how not to cut off your points. Now, that was a very simple little video, a little simple thing I was showing you with a 4-patch, a little, what was it? It was a windmill. Got it. Okay, a windmill pattern on that, where you have your points all come into the middle. That's where the technique that Carol was talking about, spinning your centerpiece, would be very appropriate. I didn't do that, but yeah, that's one of those case scenarios where that would work. So there was that, and the Accuquilt as well. So this week on So Chatty, I will be putting in the last video. Well, it's not going to be the last video for the Accuquilt series, but it'll be the last video because it'll be the last So Chatty for about 3 weeks' time. And we're looking at the other add-on cube that you can get for all the cubes, and that's the angles. And we'll show you. I have a little video to show you what you can do with that. When we get back from Japan, my plan is to probably continue with Accuquilt, but we'll look at some of the more specific dies. We've worked our way through the cube sets. You've seen the Carpenter's Wheel. Probably shouldn't have started with the Carpenter's Wheel. Should have started with the cube sets, but I do the simplest things with the greatest of complexity. So yeah, we'll look at, I think I've got a couple of, they're still unwrapped, and one of those is the double wedding ring block. Now that one's going to be interesting. It's still in its original packaging, and I don't really have a great desire to make a double wedding ring quilt. I mean, that seems to be a part of the holy list of must-do quilts if you're a quilter, is the double wedding ring. And to me, it is a little old-fashioned, and it's something people traditionally like to do as a wedding gift. And well, at my age, nobody's getting married. They're divorced or dead, one or the other. So I don't know. But then again, maybe I should make one. I'll make a block at least, and it's curves. So I want you to see how Accuquilt handles curves. In fact, I think I've only done one other Accuquilt one way back in the past. I didn't make a video of it, where I had to do curves with it. And Accuquilt has a neat way to help you with sewing your curves together, which is great because a lot of us shy away from curves. They're scary. So that's the plans there, and then look at maybe some of the other blocks as well. And I'm saving all these blocks, even though they are kind of mismatched colors and things like that. But I'm thinking that maybe over time I will produce, using these blocks, a small quilt or something, or some project with them, maybe a bag front or something like that. We'll see. Okay. I have been asked to do some demos, though, on how not to cut off points when making flying geese. And that's a good one. So that's on the books. I'll take a look at doing something like that. I think I'll kind of take a look at doing flying geese in general, because there are several different ways you can do flying geese, and there is a special ruler. The Ultimate Flying Geese Ruler actually is what it's called, and I love that ruler for making flying geese. And so maybe I'll do a video about that as well at the same time, because flying geese, I like flying geese. I think they look really cool in a quilt. They look great for borders and things like that. They really add another dimension to whatever you might be making. However, some people get very discouraged with them because they get their block a little wonky, or, you know, they do cut off their points and things like that. So I'm going to show you what I do to make, you know, flying geese you can be proud of. Another one is how to square up a quilt. Well, that one's coming down the road. You know that, and starting with today, I am starting a new series based on my pattern Healing Waters, which is free. You can download it. Just go to the show notes, click on the link, takes you to my Google Drive, and you just click on it and you download it to your computer. Ignore a message that might come up and say something about this hasn't been scanned or something like that. Ignore it. I don't know why that comes up. That has something to do with Google. It may or may not show up on your screen. Just hit download. It's fine. You'll be fine with it. And you can work along with these series of videos. However, this series of videos it's sort of a tutorial, but more of a demo of my process. So the first couple of weeks in this series, and it's going to be interrupted by our trip, so I'm just going to get started today, are about, you know, how I figured out what I want to create a pattern for. So that'll be the first few of that. So in that series, there is a part when we get closer to finishing up the quilt where I show you how to square up a quilt. So hang on for that. Okay, so that takes me to subscribers creation of the week, and this comes from our friend in France, Nadine Logan, and she's got this beautiful creation for us. So take a look. This week's quilt from a subscriber comes from my friend and subscriber, Nadine Logan, who lives in France. And Nadine writes, "Hi, Stephen. Last March, I went to visit my sister in Austin, Texas for 2 weeks. During my stay, I made this baby quilt for my sister's best friend's first granddaughter. The baby name is Violet. She was born in February 2026. And by the way, I'm not sure if the name is Violet or I should say Voulet. It's something in French. Anyways, this is a collaborative project. My sister, who doesn't sew, but luckily for me owns a sewing machine, chose the pattern and fabrics. I sewed and quilted it. As you know, I usually hand quilt all my quilts, but since I didn't have enough time, this baby quilt is exceptionally machine quilted. And just for fun, I made 2 small pillowcases with the leftover fabric, and my sister bought the 2 12-inch pillows to put inside. So Nadine, this is a beautiful quilt, and yeah, you sort of broke out of your comfort zone by doing some machine quilting on it, but it turned out wonderful, and I love the 2 matching pillows as well that go with it. I'm sure she was thrilled, and it'll be a great memory for your sister and maybe eventually the baby of your trip to visit them in Texas. Thanks, Nadine, for sending this to us. Now, I am out of quilts to show. So here's your mission. I'm going to be away for 3 weeks. You can start sending me pictures of your creations. They don't have to be a quilt. They can be a bag. They could be anything that you made that you are proud of and you'd like to show off. And I will be happy to collect those from you. Just send them to my email as an attachment. 1 picture. Let me emphasize this. 1 picture only. Okay? JPEG format, JPG format. Send it as an attachment. Okay, to my email. Email's down in the show notes. Read the first part of the show notes. It tells you how to find it. okay, if you don't already have it. And write me a little blurb about it, no more than 50 words. The blurb doesn't need to be anything that's major. I don't need your life story about it. Just maybe what the pattern was, if you had any problems with it or why you selected it, and, who's it going to? Are you keeping it yourself? What are your plans for it? That kind of thing. But under 50 words, please. And I'll be happy to put it up here and show it off for you. Okay, so you've got 3 weeks. Well, you've got longer than that. You can do it anytime you wish. Okay, I can't do anything with it while I'm on my vacation, anyways. Getting all choked up about this. So, yeah, but I need some because actually I had nothing for this week until Nadine sent me this. She must have read my mind, but I was going, what am I going to do for this segment? So thank you, Nadine, for that. Okay, that takes me to short tip of the week from YouTube. And, forks aren't just for eating anymore. They can be used for other things, too. This week's YouTube short tip is about how to put the pole onto a zipper using a fork and your sewing machine. This looks like a great idea. Now, I can't say I have tried this. I have a zipper jig that I use, but if you don't have one of those, this might be something that'll work well for you if you struggle with putting those poles on, especially those zippers that come by the yard. So check this out to learn a new technique. Okay, so this takes me to this first video in the series I already mentioned about Healing Waters, my quilt that I designed around a panel using indigenous fabrics. And so this week, last week I actually started it, and I showed you how I used EQ8. Now I'm going to talk about how I came up with the fabrics that I used, because the indigenous fabrics, I wanted to do something with them, but they are very busy. They're very beautiful, but very busy. So I've talked first about fabric selection, and there are actually two videos here, one right after the other. The first one, fabric selection, runs about 6 minutes long, and then how to read my pattern for Healing Waters, and that runs about 18 minutes long. So you've got a good 24 minutes with me where you can enjoy a cup of coffee, so you might want to pause me right now and go and grab that. Okay, so that takes me to that. So here you go. Got your coffee ready? So now that you've seen how I used EQ8 to create this pattern, I've already selected my fabrics in advance, but I'm going to show you those fabrics now up close and explain why I'm picking these. First of all, the panel. I loved the panel. When I first saw this, I love indigenous fabrics, and I thought this was great. I would love to build a whole quilt around that. Of course, I'd already done the Quilt of Valor one that had a panel, and so I'm using that pattern as my guide. In fact, it's exactly the same pattern and same pattern instructions as the Quilt of Valor quilt. So this is going to be also a test quilt. Besides making this in indigenous fabrics, I'm also testing my instructions to make sure everything works together. So in my instructions, and I don't have those instructions yet printed in here, I'm using the ones from the Falling Leaves Quilt of Valor quilt. I went through and figured out which fabrics I need. Now my plan is to take the instructions from this, the Falling Leaves pattern, and write them up in this one for I'm calling it right now Healing Waters, because that's the name of the fabric line that I'm using. It's from Northcott, by the way. I think it's from Northcott. Pretty sure it is. Anyways, I will be referring now to this pattern, and I'm looking at its fabric requirements. So I'm going to move this out of our way for a second and look at it. So I need the panel, and I know that. And the fabrics that I need fabric A, which is a medium color fabric. So I have my fabrics here. And this is going to be my fabric A. Really like this fabric. It looks great. So that's fabric A. So because fabric A is going to be used in the building of some of the blocks as in half square triangles, I need a fabric, a light fabric, fabric B. And fabric B is going to be this one right here. Now, picture those two together. They are busy. Traditionally, if you're making half square triangles, you should probably have one print and the other one should be a semi-print or a blender of some sort. But I'm going to take a chance and do them with these two. I also need a C fabric, and the C fabric is a medium print. And this is what I'm calling a medium print. So that's fabric C. Fabric D, a light small print. Well, light, but not so small in the print. I'm not sure how this will translate, but we'll find out. And the last fabric is a dark small print. And again, not that small a print. So basically, I am playing with how these fabrics are going to look. My picture shows you, and it is going to be busy. There's no two ways about it. But we'll see what happens. So you're going to ask, well, how do I pick my my fabrics? Well, basically, I picked my fabrics according to the colors that are in the panel. So here's the part of the panel, but I picked my colors from this. So obviously the black is in here, but there is some shades of that gray here as well. There is spots of white and these blues, and there's several of these blues, and this all comes from the same line, Healing Waters. So yeah, they should go together, but I'm double checking. This one, the black, yes, the blues and the yellows and oranges, well, there's all of that in there. And of course the blues are here too. White and black goes with everything. And then the background of this in this shade of blue, well, that shade of blue is right in here. And all these other colors are in the other fabrics as well. So all of this should work together. The only thing I'm a little worried about is, because these are all patterned, will it be too busy? So what I will do next is I'm going to cut enough pieces out to create, where is it? I'm going to make one of each of the major blocks. Block 1, block 2, block 3, and block 4. And I will determine, once I see what those blocks actually look like, they'll be test blocks, I will make the determination as to whether or not I have to reselect my fabrics. So yeah, this one's a little tricky because I really want to use these fabrics, but I might have to substitute a couple of the prints for things that read more as solids or semi-solids. So we'll see when I get to that. So that'll be the next video I will make to show you my process in making the test blocks. But before we start making any of the blocks, it's always a good idea to read through the pattern. And I'm famous for not doing this, but I'm going to do it with my own pattern for a couple of reasons. One to make you see how it is that I'm approaching this particular project. It might be a little bit different than what you're used to or how you would approach it, and it's just my suggestion. And two, it's kind of like a self-test for myself to see if there's any mistakes that in my pattern, since I'm pretty new to pattern writing, to see whether or not I need to do some editing here. So let's start with the first page, and that's the cover page. And here you can see the whole quilt in its entirety. Now, I'm still a little worried about my selection of colors. Whether or not, or the prints that I'm using, whether there's going to be a lot of clashing. But we'll see as we start building the blocks for this, and if it looks like it is going to be that way, I can alter things. Now, this is for very specific fabric, as you're going to see, but this could be used in any fabric with any panel that you have in your supply. And if I get a chance, I will provide what I'm going to call right now a universal pattern, where you can substitute in whatever fabrics you want to use. So, as I said, there's the first page. I've put it at the level of a confident beginner because it's mostly made up of half square triangles, so most people know how to make half square triangles, but don't worry, I've included a section on how to do that in the pattern as well. And the finished size is approximately 65 inches by 76 inches. So let's go down to the first page of instructions here. And here on this page you can see I have put in a legend for which codes I'm using. So HST means half square triangle, WOF means width of fabric, which is measured from selvage to selvage, and RST is right sides together. So fundamental information, again, confident beginner, even beginner for this. And I've made the reminder, and I know that a lot of patterns do this. I don't know why, but I guess it's a good thing. Always use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, speaking of a 1/4 inch seam allowance, to keep everything accurate, it is important that you double check on your sewing machine, if you haven't done it for quite a while, that you are sewing an accurate 1/4 seam allowance. All you need to do there is take 3 short strips of fabric, lay right sides together with 2 of the strips, sew your 1/4 inch seam, or what you think is your 1/4 inch seam, and then do the same with the other strip. The strip should be about 2.5 inches unfinished in width. And then take out your ruler and measure them and see if you do truly have a 1/4 inch seam. So in order to check that, you can just measure the middle strip, and if it comes out to 2 inches between the seams, then you know you've got a 1/4 inch or an accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, once you've done that, if you do that, here I've listed all the blocks for the quilt. There are 5 main blocks. Each of the blocks is finished or finishes at 6 by 6, so unfinished they're going to be 6.5 inches square each, and the number that you're going to need. So for block number 1, you're going to need 12. For block number 2, 14. Block 3, 12. Block 4, 14. And block 5, 2. Okay. Now, in this section, I talk about the fabrics you're going to use. Now, I'm being very specific for this particular quilt, but as I said, hopefully I will be able to create a more universal pattern where you just substitute in whatever you want to use for your fabrics. And I think I'll make this section that shows the fabric and the amount and the fabric name, I make this column blank so you can write in your own fabric choices. I did put a note here. It says, please note that fabric yard uses a little bit more generous in the case of cutting or sewing errors, in case of, okay, because we all make them, right? So we should have a little extra fabric for that. So I've been fairly generous in my amounts. It's up to you whether you want to follow my measurements or not. You will need a panel, and the finished size of the panel is going to measure 29 by 40, which means, and you'll see this further in the cutting instructions, you'll need to cut that panel 29.5 inches by 40.5 inches to allow for your seam allowances. Fabric A, 1.5 meters of that. If you're an American, okay, you may have to go into Google and do a change into your system of measurement. And here, because it's very specific fabrics that came from Northcott, they're done by Healing Waters by Mark Anthony Jacobson. And I have put the numbers, with the exception of the panel, for that line of fabric, Healing Waters. And so these are the numbers. If you go into your local quilt store or whatever, these should be marked on the selvage, or if you order them online. Also, this panel, however, did not come from Northcott. It came from a site called internationaltextiles.ca. That's a Canadian store, and it's by Jessica Somers, and this is the number here for that panel if you're going to do this pattern exactly as I've laid it out. I've also given you a little swatch chart. Here's what each of the fabrics look like. This is important for later on for laying out the cut pieces to create each block. Okay, moving down my cutting instructions. Now I've put here panel, cut the panel 29.5 inches by 40.5 inches. And then I've listed each block, how many this cutting guide makes. So I've done it for one block each, but you know that I put up in this chart here the total number of blocks you'll need, and I've put that also right below the chart, make 12 of block 1 in total. And this is the format for all of the blocks that I have followed. This lists the fabrics that you need for each block to make it, and over here is how many pieces you need of each fabric. Again, remember, this is for one block only, so you'd have to multiply these numbers if you want to do mass cutting by 12, by the total number of blocks needed. So it's all listed here, and you can see it's very simple cutting because you cut strips basically. You need 3 2.5 by 2.5. I would cut a strip from selvage to selvage 2.5 inches wide, another one in fabric A 3 inches wide, and then subcut it into these squares. And since you're going to be using these fabrics throughout, you might want to, and I didn't include this, you could, multiply how much fabric A you need throughout this whole pattern, and B and C, etc., and work out how many, if you blocks or units, let's call them units, that you're going to need. It's up to you, whatever works best for you. Some people like to just make a cut for one block or 2 blocks at a time and move on from there. Totally up to you. So that's how each one of the blocks is laid out. Okay, you'll also need border strips. So you're going to have to cut 6 3.5 by width of fabric strips. Remember, width of fabric is from selvage to selvage of fabric B for the inside border, and cut 8 2.5 inch by width of fabric strips of fabric A for the outside border. This will become clear when you see the diagram that I have a little further on in the instructions as to where their placement. But again, if you don't remember what your fabrics are, go up to your little swatch chart up here, and you'll be able to have a physical representation of each fabric. Okay, so we're moving down. Now we're going into making the blocks. Now, most of this pattern is made up of HSTs, okay? In fact, it's a whole thing, with the exception of the panel and the border strips. It's all HSTs, which are half square triangles. So here are general instructions for making an HST. And basically, you take one 3-inch square of fabric. So you're going to want to mark when you cut your units which ones are the 2.5-inch square and which are the 3-inch square, because they're very close, and you don't want to get them mixed up for this. So you're going to take one 3-inch square of one of your fabrics, and you're going to lay it on top of one of the other 3-inch squares of fabric according to the cutting chart above, and aligning all the edges. And this is right sides together. You draw a diagonal line from corner to corner, and there's a diagram here, number 1. And you sew a 1/4 inch away on both sides of the drawn line, and then you cut along the drawn line. So here in diagram number 2. You're going to press the seam towards the darker fabric, and you're going to trim these pieces to 2.5 inches square. You've now created the half square triangle pieces you need, okay? And that's essentially what you're going to do throughout this pattern. Now, one tip here, I use a strip tube ruler to square up my half square triangles before I press them open. And I'll try to do a little demo of how that works so you can see, but whatever method works for you. Half square triangle, that measures 2.5 inches, okay, square. And it says here, make blocks 1 through to 4, referring to the cutting instructions for the total number of blocks you need to make. And then use the diagrams below for the layout of each unit to form the blocks. So here we go. I decided it was easier than trying to explain how to lay out each block. It was easier visually to actually show you what they look like. And again, use the swatch diagram to figure out the placement. So you're essentially making a 9 patch. Now, I would suggest that you lay your pieces out for 1 block at a time, and so 1 block at a time, because you're making quite a few, it will keep things straight for you. So the diagrams here for block 1, block 2, block 3, block 4. I didn't put in a diagram for block 5 because block 5 is just a 6.5 inch square of fabric that you cut out. So that's pretty easy. Okay, now once you've got all of your blocks made and labeled them, put all your blocks 1s together, all your block 2s together, etc. Make the inside pieces. So you're using the 6 3.5 inch by width of fabric strips of fabric B cut for the inside border. Out of all of those 6, you're going to make 4 strips that each measure approximately 58 inches long. Now, I've given you that measurement, but I don't do it this way. I make the 4 strips, which are going to be actually a little longer than 58 inches. And then when it comes time for me to sew this to the quilt itself, I will have a little bit of overhang at the top, a little overhang at the bottom, sew it, and then trim it even with the top and bottom of the quilt. And I do the same with the top and bottom strips as well. But it's up to you, whatever method you have learned or you know what to use that works for you. And it's similar with making the outside border pieces. You will use the 8 2.5 inch width of fabric strips from fabric A, and you need 2 74 inch strips and 2 59 inch strips, and then you'll be attaching those to the quilt. You may want to, well, after you've got the blocks made, you may hold off on wanting to do this until you've worked your way through the assembling the quilt. Now, assembling the quilt is a little bit different because we're dealing with blocks, and because these rows are interrupted by a solid strip of fabric, this is how I suggest you do it. So you're going to make 2 side columns following the diagram below, and make sure all the blocks are oriented in the correct direction. That's important. So here I put a diagram for one of the side blocks. You're making a left and a right, so they're going to be flipped, but that's okay because you can sew all of these exactly the same, sew them the same, and just turn it around. It'll work. And I've listed here what each block is. Block 1, 2 block 2s, then a block 5, which is fabric A, that 6.5 inch piece that you've cut, and then 2 block 2s and a block 1. And you're going to make 2 of these, as I said. And then you're going to do the top and bottom row similar. They're not exactly the same, but you'll follow the diagram, and you can see here 2 block 1s, 3 block 2s, 2 block 1s. And you're going to make 2 of these, and they're both exactly the same. The bottom one is just going to get flipped around, and it'll fit fine. Okay, so then you're going to sew the side columns to the left and right side of the panel. Make sure all the blocks are oriented in the correct direction, and I have a diagram for this. And then once you've done that, you're going to sew the top and bottom rows to the top and bottom of the panel, and you're going to make sure all the blocks are also oriented in the correct direction. And here's the diagram I'm referring to. So there's your panel, and there's your left and your right columns, or columns basically we'll call them. They're sewn to the panel first, and then you've sewed the top and then sewed the bottom, making sure you have the orientation correct as shown in the diagram. And then to this, you're going to sew the inside border strips, and you're going to sew the top and bottom border strips. And this diagram shows you what that will look like. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is something very similar to what we did with the side and top strips. We're going to make 2 left and right outside columns following the diagram below. Is that confusing? Make 2 left and right outside columns. I think I should change that to make a left and a right outside column following the diagram, because that sounds like you're doubling up, and you're not. You're just making one of each of these. So I will change that in the pattern. And with the magic of television, I have made that change in the pattern. So you're making 1 left and you're making 1 right outside column, and this is the orientation, and this is where the block placement is. The same idea. You've got a block 3, then 2 block 4s here, 2 block 4s here, 2 block 4s here, 2 block 4s here, and a block 3. And pay close attention to where block 3s, their orientation. That one little corner piece goes up, and this little corner piece goes down. And then you make the top and bottom rows following the diagram the same way, and I have it all listed here as to the order of the blocks. So then you're going to sew the outside side columns to the left and right side of the quilt center, and then the top and bottom row. So these 2 things are sewn as shown in the diagram. So what your quilt is going to look like at this point, when that's all sewn together, is what you see here. Now you're going to put on the outside border strips to the sides of the quilt, and the top and bottom border strips as well. They're the solid strips that we cut earlier. And it's going to look like this. And that's the end of the quilt. That's finished at this point. And so now you can take it and, layer it, put it on your long arm, under your sewing machine, and do your quilting as you see fit. And the measure should be, finished quilt should measure about 60 by 72 inches. So that's all there is to this quilt. I hope these instructions are clear for you. I may add some things to it as I get working on the quilt itself, but I think I'm pretty confident with that one little change I made that things are fairly accurate, not fairly, are accurate, and it's easy for you to follow. So that brings me to the end of today's episode. And as I said, last one for 3 weeks. So, I'm hoping you will miss me and you'll want more of all of this. But anyways, you have a break. You have your homework about finding me something that I can showcase on here for you. And tune into the Stephen and Walter in Japan videos. You will find a special playlist once those start being created and go up, where you'll find all of those on a pretty much a day-by-day basis. Those will start probably late next Monday, maybe not till next Tuesday, because we fly out Sunday, but when we get there, it'll be Monday their time. It'll still be Sunday here, I think, a Sunday night, but it'll be Monday in the afternoon when we get there. And by the time we get to our hotel and that, and I have a feeling jet lag will have set in, we may be going to bed early, and there won't be a heck of a lot to make a video about. I may take a few shots of, the airport in Tokyo and that kind of thing. So the first one will probably come out on Tuesday Japan time. Yeah, I'm not even going to think about the time zone thing right now. Just check. Okay, that's it for me. Hope you have a great week. I hope you have a good May, because we're going to miss most of May here in Canada because of the trip. And we'll see you soon. Bye for now. Hi, I'm just going to interrupt my program for just 1 second to remind you to like the video, to subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for future notifications. That's all I ask of you. Show me a little love. Thanks.